This is the day the Lord has made. We're rejoicing. We're so glad in it. Thank you for tuning in to this week's Thankful Thursday. I'm so excited you've taken time out of your day to join us for these few minutes of inspiration. I want you to help us get the word out about what's happening right now. If you're tuned in via Facebook Live, take a moment and share your stream and start a watch party. And if you're tuned in from YouTube, on our YouTube channel, I want you to click the bell to become a subscriber. So as we continue our Thankful Thursday series, I want to invite your attention to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, for our consideration. And I want to focus our attention on verses 11 through 19. And when you get there, you'll find these words in the English Standard Version. On the way to Jerusalem, he was passing along between Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered a village, he was met by 10 lepers who stood at a distance and lifted up their voices, saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. When he saw them, he said to them, Go and show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. And he fell on his face at Jesus' feet, giving him thanks. Now he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus answered, Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? And he said to him, Rise and go your way. Your faith has made you well. But time decides to share. I want to raise this question. What's different about this one? If you've been an active participant in a church or have consistently attended for any length of time, you've heard a preacher call attention to this particular miracle in the ministry of Jesus. Perhaps you've read it for yourself or in childhood remembered being one of your Sunday school lessons. But there are maybe some who are encountering this story for the first time. Whether this is your first time or the umpteenth time, there are two things that obviously stick out. The first is the very fact that 10 lepers are healed of their debilitating ailment when Jesus tells them to go show themselves to the priest. As they were heading to receive a priestly declaration of health, they were healed. Jesus didn't have to lay hands on them or anoint them or motion towards them. The healing came as they were heading to the priest. The second thing that sticks out in this story is that typically Jesus performs miracles, and on the back end of the miracle, he may do a teaching. It is quite normal when someone expresses gratitude towards Jesus for the miraculous being done. But here it appears that Jesus is a bit perturbed at the response of 9 out of 10 who had just been healed of their leprosy. Listen to what he says in verse 17 and 18. Then Jesus answered, Were not 10 cleansed? Where are the 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner? I get it. Everyone received the blessing of healing, but only one of them returned to thank Jesus for what he and he alone has done for them. It just doesn't seem right, because being ungrateful for what God has done for us comes from a mentality where we take for granted the miraculous that God does for us each and every day. Can I help y'all see the miraculous that God does that you and I take for granted? The fact that God designed us in such a way that whether we are awake or asleep and without thinking about it, your heart keeps beating, your lungs keep breathing, and our lives keep going. That's a miracle that we shouldn't take for granted, but that we should be thankful for. The fact that the earth is suspended at just the right distance from the sun so that we are not incinerated and the proper proximity to the sun so that we don't freeze to death. God fixed it so that the earth rotates at just the right speed so as to give us a sunrise, sunset, and hours of daylight, and in between, while giving us an evening to cease from work and to rest. That's an everyday miracle that God does that we shouldn't take for granted. It is sometimes in the everyday and even simple things God does that we need to see the miraculous and be thankful for it. And I believe this text is purposed to teach us that each and every day we have a decision to make. Will we be like the 9 or will we be like the 1? Ask yourself the question, am I the 9 or am I the 1? And here's the question I'll pray that we can unpack in the time that remains. What's different about this one? First of all, I believe we can reasonably conclude that this one who turned back to thank Jesus for what he's done, it does so is because he realized that out of all the routes that Jesus could have traveled and at the various times that Jesus could have been traveling, God facilitated an encounter that they could not have planned, even if they tried. It might seem like happenstance to us, but this is evidently a providential moment. God fixed it so that the cure for their condition would be in the right place at the right time. And when this one realized how God navigated the circumstances of his life to intersect with the itinerary of Jesus as he is on his way to Calvary, he could not move on from this moment without giving thanks and praise for what he has just done for them. Maybe you have not thought about it a lot, but in all of our lives, God has a way of getting to us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it, wherever we may be. Sometimes God providentially orders our steps to people and places where that which we need is waiting for us. Then sometimes when our lives seem stagnant and there is no way of us breaking out of the rut that we found ourselves in, and seemingly out of nowhere, God moves on our behalf. Other times, God seems elusive and the answers to our prayers seem to be evasive. And right when we least expect it, God works things out in our favor. And when we look back on these moments and assess the miracle that God has brought to pass in our lives, we cannot help but to see how meticulously God worked in ushering us into an encounter with him that came at just the right time with exactly what we needed. And when we take all of that into consideration, we have to be like the one who turned back to give God thanks for what he and he alone has done for us. What's so different about this one? Well, secondly, he thanked Jesus because he had received a new lease on life. To appreciate what I'm saying here, you have to understand what leprosy was and how it was treated societally, since there was little to no treatment for it medically. Leprosy is what we know in modern medicine as Hansen's disease. According to the CDC, leprosy can affect the nerves, skin, eyes, and lining of the nose. The bacteria attack the nerves, which can become swollen under the skin. This can cause the affected areas to lose the ability to sense, touch, and pain, which can lead to injuries like cuts and burns. Usually the affected skin changes color and it either becomes lighter or darker, often dry or flaky with loss of feeling, or reddish due to inflammation of the skin. Back then, it was thought to be a highly contagious disease. Therefore, lepers were forbidden to come near other people or interact with anyone other than other lepers. Lepers were to practice physical distancing by not coming within 6 feet of other people. They were also considered ceremonially unclean, meaning that they were barred from joining with the worshiping community. So when we take all of this into consideration, we can understand the overwhelming response of that one who returned. He knew that the healing that Jesus gave him had multi-layered significance. It would mean that he could be a part of the community again. It meant that he could be around his family and friends again. It meant that he could join again into the worship at the temple. It meant that he could be gainfully employed and did not have to worry about where his next meal was going to come from. Literally, in every sense of the expression, it gave him a new lease on life. So with such a life-changing experience happening because of the power of Jesus Christ, how could he hold back from going back and giving God glory? There are those of you who are watching today who can say that since you have come into contact with Jesus, he has made the difference in your life. Before you met Jesus, to borrow some of the language of our foreparents, we were too mean to live and not fit to die. We were on our way to hell on a dump truck with no brakes. We had no purpose, no vision, no direction, and no hope. But when we met Jesus, it clarified our purpose and vision, rerouted us from our hell-bound destiny, and gave us a hope and a future. And so we can join in with James Cleveland and testify if anyone should ever write our life story for whatever reason there might be, you'd be there between each line of pain and glory, because Jesus is the best thing that ever happened to me. And since he is the best thing that ever happened to us, And we can't help but to give him thanks and praise. But lastly, when we look at this one who returned, gave thanks to Jesus, what makes him so different is that he recognizes that Jesus has reoriented his worship. Please understand that Luke is emphasizing that this one who returned is not Jewish, in that verse 16 says explicitly he was a Samaritan. Verse 18 quotes Jesus as saying, "Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" This has profound implications. This word foreigner appears nowhere else in the New Testament, but it does appear in the famous inscription on the exterior of the temple that warns non-Jewish people from entering. So in a real sense, not only was this leper prohibited from seeing the priest, but he was also barred from entering the place of worship. As a matter of fact, when Jesus says, "Go show yourself to the priest," this leper was not headed to Jerusalem, but he was headed to Mount Gerizim, which is where Samaritans worshiped. So when this miracle happens because of Jesus, this Samaritan leper initially heads off with the other 9 lepers, but in my sanctified imagination, he makes a U-turn because he realizes he does not need a temple to worship God, because worship is not tied to a place. Worship is connected to a person, Jesus Christ. So since Jesus is right in front of him, he praised God with a loud voice, fell on his face at the feet of Jesus, and gave him thanks, because his worship was not determined by a place, but it was grounded in the person of the Lord Jesus Christ. And I'm talking to someone today who just can't wait to get back in the church building. And God has given you a revelation in this season that as much as it is biblical and good and right for us to come together to worship in the same place, this season is teaching us that our worship is not tied to a specific place, but to God in 3 persons, the Blessed Trinity. And last time I checked, God is everywhere simultaneously. That means I don't have to wait until the church doors open again to tell him thank you for what he's done for me. With all that people have endured in this pandemic, with hundreds of thousands of people dead, millions infected, and millions of people unemployed and threatened with eviction or with utilities being shut off, I cannot see how we can withhold giving thanks to God for what he's done for us. And if you're still alive, you should give him thanks. If you've been spared from being infected by COVID-19, or if you have survived a bout with COVID-19, you should thank God. If you still have a roof over your head, you should give God thanks. If you're still employed, you give God praise. And I don't have to tell you what to praise God for. I just want you to know, if you know what God has done for you and that God is where you are right now, you should give God thanks, praise, glory, and honor for what God has done and what God shall do. Be the one who is different from the 9. Be the one who will give God thanks and praise for what you know only God has done for you. That's all I have on this thankful Thursday. Be grateful for what God has done and worship God wherever you may find yourself at on this day. Well, that's the end of our time on this Thursday. Join me next Thursday. That's right, Thanksgiving Day. I have a final word on a Thankful Thursday to share with you. Also, make plans to join with us this Sunday, 10:30 a.m. or 4 p.m. for our time of online worship. God bless you and God keep you. I love you, and there's nothing you can do about it.